Hey everybody, I have a video here for you today, and this is on the Gospel of Thomas. That's what you're seeing in front of you right now. And those of you who have followed my channel know I've been talking a lot on the first century and the early formations of Christianity. And I have, I think, at least, I have uncovered some lost history, which when even I hear myself talking about it, I think it is pretty outrageous, but it is backed up by scores of evidence that I have produced for you, that the Shroud of Turin was the original catalyst for this very earliest form of Christianity that the Roman authorities and government officials who were involved in the church rewrote in the text we know as the New Testament. And I wanted to look at the Gospel of Thomas, and I have made one video called the Robe of Glory, and is known as the Hymn of the Pearl, and that comes from the Acts of Thomas. And so I wanted to look at the Gospel of Thomas, and the truth about this kind of hit me square in the face. And let's look at the first line of the Gospel of Thomas. This is the Gnostic Society Library. It says, "These are the secret sayings that the living Jesus spoke and that Didymus Judas Thomas recorded." And there is a whole plethora of theories on who Didymus Judas Thomas was. And people say, well, this is Thomas, and Didymos is Greek for twin. So they say this is Thomas, the twin of Jesus. And what they should really say also is Toma. Thomas without the S is Aramaic for twin. So this was never Thomas, the twin of Jesus. This was simply the twin, and I think that is very important. And let's look at one saying here. This is these are called logios, I believe. That is Greek for sayings of Jesus. And this is number 13. It says, Jesus said to his disciples, "Compare me. Tell me who I am like." Simon Peter said to him, "You are like a righteous angel." Matthew said to him, "You are like a wise philosopher." Thomas said to him, "Master, my mouth is wholly incapable of saying whom you are like." And I think there's a reason for that. Now, the Gospel of Thomas, this is a website. I will leave the link below, but it goes into a little bit about what was found at Nag Hammadi, and that is a small town in Egypt where some codices were found, and these were books that were hidden away in the 4th century during the 300 sometime, probably after 325, when the Council of Nicaea declared these what are called apocryphal texts to be probably illegal to own, and you were probably killed if you had them. So they were hidden away, and the Gospel of Thomas was one of those, and people who read this say it's a very, one of their favorite texts, a lot of people say. And it is very confusing why Eusebius, the very father or the church historian, the official church historian of Rome, says these are a complete heresy, and people are confused to why. But I think there is a very clear reason. Now, the Gospel of Thomas, people have said the dates of this writing, the theories are wide-ranging. But everything that I've researched, and I've looked into this pretty carefully, these, I think, are as close to the original text as we can find. A lot of sayings in the New Testament, I believe, are written off these, and you can kind of tell, because these are simpler sayings in the Gospel of Thomas, and you can see how they were kind of rewritten in the New Testament. And the date of these, I think they could go back to the very 1st century, and as close to some of these original writings as we can find from this original source that came from Edessa, Turkey. And historians call that original source Q. That is their simple generic term for it, the Q text. Now, what do we know about Thomas? Well, he was the apostle of Edessa, Turkey. He was the twin. And the Robe of Glory, the Hymn of the Pearl, which I go over, that comes from the Acts of Thomas, and everybody who comments on that says that is written from the perspective of the soul of the main character. And that's exactly what the Acts of Thomas people say. Historians who comment on it, they say it is written from the perspective of the resurrected Jesus, from the dead and resurrected Jesus. Now, Do we have a twin of Jesus at Odessa, Turkey, that represents the soul of the resurrected Jesus? Well, yes, we still have it today. It's known as the Shroud of Turin. It was known as the image of Odessa back then. And this is exactly what the Acts of Thomas and the Hymn of the Pearl does. It is written from the perspective of the soul of the main character, and that, the Hymn of the Pearl, is clearly written about the Shroud of Turin. The Acts of Thomas, if it was renamed today, should be called the Gospel of the Shroud. It comes from Odessa, Turkey. It is the twin. It is the soul of the resurrected Jesus. That's what it symbolizes, or at least symbolized to these people. But the church fathers call the figure on this Simon Magus. They make up a total made-up bullshit story about Simon Magus being some evil sorcerer. I believe Simon Magus was a king of Odessa, Turkey. He is renamed Simon Magus by the people of the fathers of the church. It was a political power struggle, as well as being named the Messiah. I believe the emperorship of Rome was at stake, and as any political struggle, that happens, enemies call each other liars and blasphemers. Trump calls Cruz lying Ted. Well, back then, they called him blasphemous or heretical Simon. Now, I will leave the link for my Hymn of the Pearl video and my last video where the church fathers named Simon Magus as the figure on the Shroud of Turin. I will leave those links below in case you haven't seen those. But let's read a little bit of the Gospel of Thomas, keeping in mind the Simon Magus story in my previous video, and that this is being told from the perspective of the dead and risen Jesus. That is coming from the perspective of what is symbolized on the shroud. Number 10, Jesus said, I have cast fire upon the world, and look, I am guarding it until it blazes. And remember, the whole religion, you could say, of Simon Magus was this fire. He perfectly describes as the fire, the spark of divinity that is present in everybody before and after they are alive. Well, let's go on here to number 22. Number 22, it says, Jesus saw some babies nursing. He said to his disciples, these nursing babies are like those who enter the Father's kingdom. They said to him, then shall we enter the Father's kingdom as babies? Jesus said to them, when you make the two into one, and when you make the inner like the outer, and the outer like the inner, and the upper like the lower, and when you make male and female into a single one, so that the male will not be male, nor the female be female, when you make the eyes in place of an eye, a hand in place of a hand, a foot in place of a foot, an image in place of an image, then you will enter the kingdom. Let's go on here to number 39. Jesus said, the Pharisees and the scholars. Now, who are the Pharisees? These are the people who inhabit Qumran and Masada, the authors of the Dead Sea Scrolls. What does Jesus say about this? According to his twin, the Pharisees and the scholars have taken the keys of knowledge and have hidden them. They have not entered, nor have they allowed those who want to enter to do so. He's talking about their keys of knowledge, and they have hidden them. He is talking about the Dead Sea Scrolls. And this was a militant religion against Rome, and that's another reason that the fathers want this covered up and to go away. Just wanted to state that. Let's go on to number 50. Jesus says, if they say to you, where have you come from? Say to them, we have come from the light, from the place where the light came into being by itself, established itself, and appeared in their image. Let's go on to number 60. He saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb and going to Judea. He said to his disciples, that person around the lamb. They said to him, so that he may kill it and eat it? He said to them, he will not eat it while it is alive, but only after he has killed it, and it has become a carcass. And the Samaritan, that's exactly, so Simon Magus is a Samaritan, carrying a lamb going to Judea. There is some deep symbolism in that saying. Let's go on to number 87. Jesus said, "How miserable is the body that depends on a body? How miserable is a soul that depends on these two?" That is number 87. Number 98. Jesus said, "The Father's kingdom is like a person who wanted to kill someone powerful. While still at home, he drew his sword and thrust it into the wall to find out whether his hand would go in. Then he killed the powerful one." And remember, there's a story about Thomas, and he puts his hand into the wound in Jesus to verify that he is actually believing what he has seen. I think that's where that comes from. Number 105, remember I say the church fathers call Helena, this queen, a prostitute? Say number 105, Jesus said, "Whoever knows thy father and thy mother will be called..." Oh, I'm sorry, let me read that again. Jesus said, "Whoever knows the father and the mother will be called the child of a whore." Number 112, Jesus said, "Damn the flesh that depends on the soul. Damn the soul that depends on the flesh." And at the very end, and everybody who has commented that I read, or a lot of people commented on the Gospel of Thomas, they say that this, the very end, was probably added to the original collection at a later date. And this is just to make the whole Gospel maybe blasphemous. It says, Simon Peter said to them, "Make Mary leave us, for females don't deserve life." Jesus said, "Look, I will guide her to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males. For every female who makes herself male will enter the kingdom of heaven." Now, what are my thoughts on what commentators say was clearly added to the end of the Gospel of Thomas at a later date? Well, I think this line, "Make Mary leave us, for females don't deserve life," I think that was added by the church fathers to totally discredit this text. And where it says, Jesus said, "Look, I will guide her to make her male, so that she too may become a living spirit resembling you males." And this is taken from the text of Simon Magus, and what is he clearly describes as Sophia. And this is just a deep esoteric philosophy or theosophy, and I'm not going to go into it. This video is already too long, but I will leave the whole text for Simon Magus below, and also the Gospel of Thomas, so you can kind of compare the two and read them from the perspective of the Gospel of Thomas as being written from the perspective of the Shroud, the perspective of the soul and resurrected Jesus, or what became Jesus in the New Testament. Originally, I believe he was the king of Edessa. Ralph Ellis says Simon Magus in real history was probably King Agbar. It isn't that perfect. Eusebius writes that it's King Agbar who originally receives the holy image at Edessa. So people would not, think that it was actually King Agbar on the Shroud of Turin, or on the image of Edessa. That is one theory, that it is actually King Agbar, and there was a few of them, so which one in real history that represents, it kind of gets a little dicey, but I think the King Agbar tradition of Edessa, Turkey is exactly where the Shroud comes from, and I think the writings of the Church Fathers prove that, and they tried to make it a total heresy. Now, I remembered in a video I made maybe 3 or 4 years ago, Michael Tessarian commented on the Gospel of Thomas, so I thought it'd be interesting just to look at what he said real quick in that video. And he doesn't connect this to the Shroud in any way, but let's just hear what he has to say about the Gospel of Thomas in this video I made a few years ago, and I will leave the link below.
Now, you know something? There was books left out of the Bible, and it's important to start finding out why. Jesus said in the Gospel of Thomas, this is one of the great Gnostic Gospels that was thrown away, "When you see your likeness, you rejoice." But when you see your images which come into existence before you, which neither die nor are made manifest, how much will you bear? Now, it's very flowery language, a different language, but can you see now what is being said here? When you see your likeness, you rejoice. Meaning, when you're in the persona, and you're in the world of, oh, I play the fashion game, and everybody then gives me acknowledgement, and I give acknowledgement, you rejoice. But when you see the primordial images which come into existence before you, but these which are neither die or are made manifest, meaning the unconscious mind, how much then will you bear? It's an old story.
So that was Michael Tessarian commenting on the Gospel of Thomas, and the Gospel of Thomas, I think, matches up extremely well with the teachings of Simon Magus. And once again, I will leave links below so you can verify this by reading it yourself. And I think the church fathers, as well as wanting to erase the history of where this came from, also commentators have said they just didn't quite get the depths of this writing, which I think is kind of funny. And how does this get lost to history, this whole story? Well, in Edessa, Turkey, I believe that monarch, that was the King Abgar monarch, was pretty much out of power by 250. Islamic rulers came in, I think, about the 6th century. So maybe 1,500 years ago, this was all but starting to be erased in its original home city. And, of course, that disgraceful carbon dating of the Shroud that led millions to believe the Shroud was a hoax. That was an ongoing continuation by the church to discredit the Shroud, and impacted the beliefs of millions. And one thing I want to mention here is I have mentioned in previous videos that it seemed Dan Brown encoded a lot of things into the Da Vinci Code where maybe he knew this real, true story. And I just kind of said that as kind of a lark, kind of a joke. But I was watching it the other night, and I couldn't help but notice the main character's name, Sophie. What was the title, or in one word to sum up, the religion of Simon Magus, the guy who appears on the Shroud? It was Sophia. That was the Theosophy of Simon, Sophia. The Priory of Sion was formed to cover it up. If you just put an M in the middle of the Priory of Sion, you get the Priory of Simon. So I just wanted to mention that just to show you how I think too much. But all along I have said the Shroud is the key. It was the spark for the origins of Christianity. It came from Edessa, Turkey, and the church has been trying to cover this up for almost 2,000 years. And what is not better proof that the Shroud was the original spark for Christianity to show you here how one of the very original books was actually the Gospel of the Shroud. Hope you thought this was interesting. You have a nice day.